Imagine, for a second, running through the hallways of a shelter every single morning, waving a $10 bill around, and
Yeah.
just desperately begging anyone with a car to give you a ride.
Right, and you're not, like, trying to get to a soup kitchen or a free clinic either.
No, exactly. You are trying to get to your full-time job
Yeah.
as a construction production operator,
Yeah.
which is just wild. But that is the actual daily reality for a woman named Jaleesa Bennett at the Restart Shelter in Kansas City.
It really puts a face to the numbers.
It does. And today we are doing a deep dive that's basically taking the traditional definition of homelessness, tearing it up, and looking at the hidden infrastructure of survival operating right under our noses.
Yeah, it completely shatters that standard assumption, the one that says housing insecurity is strictly a byproduct of unemployment, because it's not.
Right. And to really intro the state of things right now, our focus today is Kansas.
We have this massive, incredibly diverse stack of sources today.
Oh, yeah, we've got everything. Federal HUD data, municipal codes, some really dense state legislation like Senate Bill 542, and even raw anonymous Reddit threads.
And all of it points to this massive shift. The person sleeping in the hospital parking garage next to you, they might just be working a 40-hour week.
Which is exactly our mission today. We want to figure out how we got here, how this collision of skyrocketing housing costs, new state laws, and grassroots responses is fundamentally reshaping what shelter even means.
Because to understand Jaleesa's story, you really have to look at the sheer mathematics of survival in this regional
Oh,
market.
right. The math is just broken.
The gap between what people earn and what it costs to simply exist is, well, it's staggering. It's the absolute root cause of the crisis.
So break down that baseline for us. Where do we start?
Okay, so in Kansas, the minimum wage is tied directly to the federal floor. That is $7.25 an hour.
Which, I mean, hasn't changed in what, over a decade?
Over a decade, yeah. Now, contrast that with the MIT Living Wage Index. And keep in mind, this index doesn't measure luxury.
Right. No vacations or fancy dinners.
Exactly. It's just the bare minimum required to cover basic expenses. Food, housing, transportation. For a single adult with no children in this market, you need to earn $22.75 an hour.
Wait, so the bare minimum to survive is more than triple the legal minimum wage?
Yes.
Wow. And what if you have kids?
Well, if you're a single parent with 2 children, that living wage jumps to $49.92 an hour.
That's almost $50 an hour just to break even.
Just to keep the lights on and food on the table. And this insurmountable deficit leads us to a really vital demographic metric we see across all our sources, which is the ALICE threshold.
ALICE, that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed, right?
Spot on.
So these are folks who are actively working, and they technically earn above the federal poverty line,
Right.
but they're still falling drastically short of the actual cost of living.
Precisely. And in Kansas, an estimated 38% of all households fall into this ALICE category.
38%.
Almost 4 out of every 10 households. Think about the implications of that.
They're basically existing on a razor's edge.
Yeah, they have zero financial buffer. For an Alice household, one unexpected emergency room visit or, a sudden $100 rent hike or a broken transmission.
It's not just an inconvenience.
No, it is the specific mechanism that immediately separates them from their housing.
Which explains how someone with a full-time construction job ends up in a shelter. But the sources point out something even more alarming, I think. Most of these working folks who lose their housing don't actually end up in a traditional shelter, do they?
They really don't. And that introduces this concept of hidden homelessness.
Okay.
Sociologists estimate that a staggering 80% of the state's unhoused population isn't out on the street where the public can see them.
80%. So where are they?
They're doubled up in cramped apartments, they're couch surfing with friends, or increasingly, they're living in their vehicles.
Oh, wow.
And the data from Johnson County is a prime example of this. It's historically a very affluent suburban area in Kansas.
Right.
When they surveyed their unhoused adults recently, 50% had active income and 57% were actively employed.
That's wild. And the number of adult-only unhoused households in that specific county surged 478% since 2016.
Yeah, the jump is just astronomical.
It really is like playing a game of musical chairs, but the game is completely rigged. Every time the music stops, not only are there fewer chairs, but the entrance fee to play doubles. And if you sit on the floor to rest, you get a citation.
That is a very accurate way to look at it, actually.
But wait, if 80% of this population is hidden away in cars and on friends' couches, how does the system even accurately count them, let alone help them?
Well, that's the critical flaw in how we measure the whole crisis.
Oh.
The primary tool the federal government uses is called the point in time, or PIT count.
Right, the PIT count.
The mechanism of the PIT count involves sending volunteers out on a single night, usually in late January, with clipboards to physically count the people they see sleeping outside or in shelters.
So they are literally just walking around looking for sleeping bags on sidewalks.
Yes, and because it relies entirely on visual confirmation, it structurally fails to capture the hidden population.
Ah, see.
A volunteer with a clipboard is going to walk right past a Honda Civic parked in a hospital garage without ever realizing a family is asleep in the back seat.
That makes so much sense.
And since federal funding systems are historically calibrated based on that visual data, traditional safety nets are largely designed to address visible, chronic street homelessness.
So when the crisis shifts to working people hiding in plain sight, the traditional system is just blind to them. And because the traditional system can't see them, and traditional housing is mathematically out of reach, these working Kansans are having to invent their own alternative survival strategies.
Right.
The car essentially becomes this like four-wheeled safety net.
It does. The vehicle offers mobility, it offers a locked door, and climate control. It becomes the only logical alternative to the street.
And navigating that reality takes us into some of the most raw material in our source stack today. I'm talking about the Reddit threads from Circumsacity and Wichita.
Oh, those were intense to read.
Yeah, you read these posts, and it's not some abstract policy debate. It is visceral. There is this one post from a domestic violence survivor who was just thrown out of her home.
Yeah, I remember that one.
She has a car, she is terrified, and she's asking the internet where she can safely sleep. And the responses she gets, they don't point her to shelters.
No, they don't.
They point her to a crowdsourced survival map of the city.
And what really stands out about those recommendations is the intense strategic logic behind them. The users aren't just naming random parking lots. They are actively analyzing the urban environment for safety and resources.
Right, like they tell her to park near hospital emergency rooms. And why? Because there are always cars coming and going at 3 in the morning, the lots are well lit, there are security guards.
And crucially, you have 24/7 bathroom access without anyone questioning why you are there.
Exactly. They also suggest 24-hour laundromats. They recommend Cracker Barrel parking lots because the corporate policy has traditionally been pretty friendly to overnight RV parkers or casino parking garages like the Argosy or Harrah's, where security is focused on the gaming floor and rarely patrols the, peripheral concrete zones.
But relying on those locations means navigating a highly complex and often really punitive legal geography. The rules change constantly depending on whose asphalt you happen to be parked on.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. Let's look at the state level. Under Kansas Department of Transportation, or KDOT, regulations, resting at a state highway rest area for up to 24 hours is permitted.
Okay, so overnight camping is technically allowed for a single night.
Right. So that provides one relatively safe, though obviously highly exposed, legal option.
But the moment you accidentally cross jurisdictions, the trap snaps shut.
Oh, immediately.
Like, take the Kansas Turnpike Authority, the KTA. They operate those service areas in the center dividers of the toll road.
Yeah.
If you park there and try to sleep, and you stay longer than 18 hours, you trigger a maximum turnpike fare penalty.
And just think about the mechanics of that penalty for a second.
Mm-hmm.
If you are sleeping in your car because you cannot afford rent, and you trigger a maximum toll fine just for stopping to rest,
How do you pay it?
you can't. It becomes an immediate debt spiral.
It's unbelievable. And it gets even more precarious when we talk about the legal protections for that vehicle.
Yes, is a huge point.
Because think about the car sitting in your driveway right now. Under the Fourth Amendment, a police officer needs a warrant, or at least overwhelming probable cause, to come inside and search your physical house.
Right.
But the second your car is forced to become your house, you kind of forfeit that protection.
You do.
Yeah.
You enter what legal scholars call the automobile exception. Because a vehicle is mobile and heavily regulated for road safety, the courts have ruled it has the absolute lowest tier of Fourth Amendment protection against warrantless searches.
Wait, so if your car is legally your only home, it actually receives the least amount of privacy protection under the law.
That's exactly right.
How are people supposed to navigate that constant threat of losing their only shelter and transportation?
Well, they're living in constant fear. And the paradox actually gets worse.
Oh.
Municipalities are increasingly passing codes that criminalize public sleeping or camping. Because of those codes, normal household items sitting in your back seat, like a pillow, a sleeping bag, a cooking utensil, yeah, they can be interpreted by an officer as physical evidence of a crime, specifically unlawful camping.
Wow.
And that interpretation provides the probable cause needed to search the vehicle. If they find you are living in it against local ordinance, the vehicle can be impounded.
Meaning, in one single stroke, you lose your shelter, your primary asset, all of your worldly possessions, and your transportation to that job that was barely keeping you afloat.
The impound lot is often the final nail in the coffin of economic mobility for these folks.
That is just brutal.
It really is.
Yeah.
And this brings us to a major inflection point in our deep dive today, because these survival maps are pushing vehicular living out of the shadows and into highly visible commercial zones, like those casino garages and Cracker Barrel lots.
Local lawmakers and state officials are starting to feel intense pressure from business owners and residents to address the visibility of the crisis.
Exactly.
Now, before we get into exactly how the state is reacting, we do need to add a quick note for you, the listener.
Yes, this is important.
The sources we are analyzing here contain some highly politically charged viewpoints regarding homelessness legislation. And these arguments come from both the left and the right wings of the political spectrum.
Right.
So we want to be clear that we are impartially reporting the arguments and the content from both sides exactly as they appear in the source material without endorsing either viewpoint.
Our goal is just simply to explain the mechanics of the laws
Yeah.
and the ideas driving this really intense public debate.
Perfect. So with that context, we can look at how the state is weaponizing its budget to reshape local enforcement.
Yeah, so have you heard of the Cicero Institute?
Honestly, I hadn't until I read through the stack of sources.
They are a Texas-based conservative think tank, and they have been heavily influential in drafting model legislation that is now appearing in Kansas.
Okay.
Specifically, we see their influence in state-level bills, like Senate Bill 542 and House Bill 2723, which were introduced by Republican lawmakers.
And these bills offer a massive carrot to municipalities dealing with the crisis, right? Like a pool of $15 million to $40 million in state grants to build shelter infrastructure.
Right, so the state is stepping in with millions of dollars to build more beds.
But there is a massive catch attached to that money.
A definitive one, yeah. Cities only receive a dime of that funding if they simultaneously pass and enforce strict local bans on unauthorized public camping and sleeping.
So they're literally tying the money to enforcement.
It is a direct legislative mechanism tying capital funding for shelters to the strict policing of public space.
Wow. So how is that pressure actually playing out on the ground in these local towns?
We're seeing sweeping local bans roll out across the state map. In Topeka, Ordinance 20544 now bans camping within 100 feet of any public infrastructure.
100 feet.
Yeah. And it goes even further to restrict private property owners. A landowner can only allow someone to camp on their own private land for 10 days within a 6-month period.
Wait, let me stop you right there. So even if a church, or I don't know, a generous farmer, wants to let someone park their RV on their private land to recover, the city law makes that illegal after 10 days.
Yes. The ordinances reach deep into private property rights to ensure camps cannot become permanent.
That is wild.
And let's look at Wyandotte County. They passed Ordinance 22130, which allows for the zero-notice removal of homeless camps located under bridges.
Okay, we have to unpack the mechanics of a zero-notice removal because the phrase sounds very bureaucratic, but the reality on the ground is devastating.
Completely devastating.
If you are at your minimum wage job and the city does a zero-notice sweep of your camp under the bridge, they don't carefully pack up your things.
No, they throw it in a dump truck.
You lose your birth certificate, your social security card, your medications, your only winter coat.
Yeah.
Try applying for a new job or getting a new apartment without a social security card or a birth certificate. The sweep itself manufactures a deeper cycle of poverty.
That is the mechanical trap of displacement. And the regulations extend way beyond major cities, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The small town of Miltonvale, they instituted a $300 daily penalty for occupying an RV outside of a designated RV park for more than 2 weeks.
$300 a day. Who can afford that?
Nobody in this situation.
Yeah.
Now, in Wichita, they did include what's called a shelter bed exception, meaning police are instructed not to issue camping citations if appropriate shelter beds aren't actually available on that given night.
Okay, so that's a slightly different approach. But what are the arguments driving this legislation? How do the proponents justify tying funding to these really strict bans?
Proponents, including researchers like Judge Clark from the Cicero Institute, argue that these bans are a necessary mechanism to pull people out of dangerous environments.
Okay.
Their argument is that unsanctioned camps rapidly deteriorate into health hazards and open-air drug markets.
So they see enforcement as a tool for intervention.
Exactly. By utilizing the threat of law enforcement, they believe it forces individuals who might otherwise avoid the system to transition into formal shelters or reconnect with their families, getting them off the streets faster than voluntary outreach alone.
Right. And what about the opponents? Because I know former unhoused residents actually testified at the State House against these bills.
Yes, individuals with lived experience, like Eric Argan-Bright and Rachel Russell, delivered some really powerful testimony opposing the measures.
What was their main argument?
They argue that legally labeling their daily struggle for survival as camping deeply sanitizes the reality of the crisis. Their position is that these laws do not solve the economic math we discussed earlier.
Right, the $22 an hour just to live.
Exactly. They say it simply criminalizes poverty. Furthermore, they point to data from neighboring states indicating that when you criminalize public sleeping, you don't end homelessness.
You just hide it.
You merely scatter the population. You push them into remote, heavily wooded areas or neighboring counties where outreach workers, food delivery, and medical teams can no longer locate them.
Which brings us to an incredibly urgent geographic question. If the law mandates removing someone from a public park, but they have a strict 10-day limit on private property, and they obviously can't afford the turnpike penalty to park on the highway,
Yeah.
where exactly does the legislation expect them to physically exist?
That paradox is the exact friction point of the crisis. The legislation primarily dictates where individuals cannot be.
Right.
And because the traditional brick-and-mortar shelters are operating at maximum capacity, this legislative scattering is forcing grassroots organizations to fundamentally rethink how aid is delivered.
Because if the unhoused population is scattered into the woods or constantly moving their cars to avoid citations, the services have to follow them. It's like the community realized the safety net has to become mobile, too.
That is exactly what we are seeing, a massive pivot toward mobile, low-barrier community interventions. Organizations are realizing that demanding a transient population come to a static building is just a failing model at this point.
Do we have some examples of that in the sources?
Oh, definitely. Look at the Moving Ahead Partnership, or MAP, in Topeka.
Oh, yeah, I read about them. That is such a brilliant pivot. They recognize that transportation is a huge barrier for someone living in a tent on the edge of town.
Right.
So MAP brings a custom trailer equipped with mobile showers and laundry directly to different encampments.
It's so smart.
And the detail that really struck me, they partnered with Kansas State University to provide free veterinary care for people's pets.
It's a perfect example of identifying and removing a very specific barrier to aid.
Yeah.
Many unhoused individuals will flat out refuse to go into a traditional shelter if the rules require them to abandon their dog. By treating the pet, you build trust with the owner.
And building community seems to be the absolute core philosophy for these grassroots groups. Like in Wichita, there is this initiative called God and Dogs.
Right, the volunteer group.
Yeah, they hand out hot dogs and build relationships in a church parking lot every week. But their history perfectly illustrates the friction with local ordinances that we were just talking about.
They've had to move a lot, haven't they?
Constantly. They were previously evicted from a public city park because they violated rules against open flame grills. Then they set up elsewhere and were displaced again by the federally funded Broadway Corridor Project, which was this infrastructure initiative aimed at, cleaning up the avenue. They are constantly navigating the exact same displacement as the people they are trying to feed.
And that constant displacement is why some organizations are focusing entirely on mobility itself. The City Union Mission in Kansas City runs this really fascinating program called the Car Ministry.
I found this concept profound when I was reading the source.
Oh, it's incredible.
They take donated cars, provide insurance, pay for a year of maintenance, and give those vehicles to program graduates. They recognize that in this sprawling urban layout, a car isn't just a convenience.
No, it's a lifeline.
It is a literal engine for economic mobility. Without reliable transportation, you cannot consistently get to the job that pays the rent.
And when a community prioritizes that kind of structural support and trust building over pure enforcement, the data shows some really remarkable results.
The Lawrence data?
Yes. The sources highlight data from the continuum of care in Lawrence.
Let's actually define that term real quick. A continuum of care, or COSI, is essentially a regional planning body mandated by the federal government to coordinate housing and funding for homeless families in a specific area, right?
Correct. It is the regional umbrella organization for all these fragmented services. So the Lawrence COSI deployed a multidisciplinary homeless response team.
Okay.
Instead of sending police officers with citation books to clear camps, they sent social workers, mental health professionals, and housing navigators.
That is a completely different approach.
Entirely. Their explicit mandate was to build relationships and trust with the unsheltered population over time without the constant threat of immediate arrest.
And the results really speak for themselves. By changing the mechanism of outreach from enforcement to trust, Lawrence saw a massive 70% decrease in their unsheltered population.
70%.
They successfully moved 48 more individuals out of the elements and into safer, sheltered environments. It proves that when the traditional static buildings are full or inaccessible, putting the safety net on wheels and meeting people where they are actually works.
The infrastructure of aid must evolve to match the reality of the crisis. It has to.
It really does. So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Yeah, why should you care?
Exactly, because it is very easy to think of homelessness as something happening, over there, a problem confined to distant downtown alleyways or very specific zip codes.
But it's not.
It's not. Because of the hidden nature of modern working homelessness, this crisis is unfolding in your immediate orbit every single day.
Yeah.
The person parking near the edge of the grocery store lot where you buy your produce, or the person taking an extra long shower at the gym where you work out, or even the children sitting next to your kids in public school.
They are everywhere.
They are navigating this hidden parallel city, just trying to survive the math of a broken housing market.
And the tension between the visibility of this population, the legislative bans we talked about, and the raw need for survival is only going to intensify as major events draw near.
Which leaves us with a really striking final thought from the sources for you to consider.
Yeah, the city council in North Kansas City recently passed a temporary ban on public camping.
A temporary ban.
Right, and the ban is specifically tied to the upcoming 2026 World Cup, which the city is helping to host. But the law is explicitly set to sunset, or expire, right after the event concludes.
Wow. A law created entirely for a sporting event.
It raises a profound question for you to mull over. When global spectacles and massive tourism collide with local housing crises, do cities prioritize the aesthetics of the event over the daily reality of their residents?
That is the question.
And what happens to that hidden working population when the tourists finally pack up and go home?
A temporary cosmetic fix for a permanent reality. We'll leave you to think on that.
Perfectly homeless is more than a phrase. It's a perspective. If you'd like to support our channel and help us keep exploring these vital topics, click on over to the Perfectly Homeless Etsy store. Pick up a warm hoodie with our logo and support the channel. Perfectly Homeless is a brand built from real life and real lessons. Wear the message of freedom and support the Perfectly Homeless mission.